Hello, students. Welcome to your social studies session. Students, in today's session, we will study history, chapter 5, Kingdoms, Kings, and an Early Republic. In this chapter, we will cover the following topics, which include how some men became rulers, Varnas, Janapadas and Mahajanapadas, taxes, changes in agriculture, and we will also do a case study on Magad and Vaji. So let us proceed with the explanation of the chapter. How some men became rulers. Students in the earlier times, these leaders and rulers were chosen with the help of voting. But how did some important men become rulers in the past? It is believed that they were probably chosen by the Jan, which are the people. But around 3000 years ago, we find certain changes in the ways in which Rajas were chosen. Some men became rulers by performing big sacrifices. Let us look at one such sacrifice, which was the Ashwamedha Yagya or the horse sacrifice. According to the sacrifice, a horse was let loose to wander freely and was guarded by Raja's men. The wandered horse used to move from kingdom to kingdom, and it was believed that whoever stopped that horse had to fight. If they allowed the horse to pass, it meant that they have accepted the authority of the Raja who is performing the yagya. These Rajas were then later on invited for the sacrifice yagya, which was performed by specially trained priests, and these priests were rewarded with gifts as well. The Raja who organized the sacrifice was recognized as being very powerful, and all those brought gifts for him as well. The Raja was a central figure in these rituals. He often had a special seat, a throne, or a tiger's skin to sit. His charioteer, who was his companion in the battlefield and witnessed his exploits, chanted his tales of glory. His relatives, especially his wives and sons, had to perform variety of minor rituals. The other Rajas were simply spectators who had to sit and watch the performance of the sacrifice. Priests performed the rituals, including sprinkling of the sacred water on the king. The ordinary people, the Vish or the Vaishya, also brought gifts for the Raja. However, some people, such as the Shudras, were not included in the rituals by the priests. Now let us move on and study about a very old system of Indian society, which is the Varnas. There were several different social groups in the society: the priest and warriors, farmers, herders, traders, craftspersons, etc. Some priests and warriors were rich, as were some farmers and traders. Others, including many herders, craftspersons, etc., were poor. The priests divided themselves into four groups according to the Varna. According to them, each Varna had a set of functions. The first Varna was that of the Brahmins. Brahmins were expected to study and teach the Vedas, perform sacrifices, and receive gifts. In the second place were the rulers, who were also known as Kshatriyas, who were expected to fight battles and protect people. Third were the Vish or the Vaishyas. These were the category of farmers, herders, and traders. Both the Kshatriyas and Vaishyas could perform sacrifices. Last were the Shudras, who had to serve the other three groups and could not perform any ritual. Often, the women were also grouped with Shudras, and both women and Shudras were not allowed to study the Vedas in the ancient period. Now let us move on and study about Janapadas and Mahajanpadas. Now, students, as these Rajas performed big sacrifices, they were now being recognized as the Rajas of Janapadas rather than Janas. What do we mean by the word Janpada? Students, the word Janpada means the land where people live or settle down. In the earlier times, people used to rule the people. The Rajas used to rule the people. But later on, Rajas had started acquiring lands and they became the Rajas of Janapadas, means the land on which people live and settled down. Archaeologists have excavated a number of settlements in these Janapadas, such as the Purana Killa in Delhi, Hastinapur near Meerut, and Atranji Khera near Itaha, which is in Uttar Pradesh. They found that people lived in huts, kept cattle, as well as other animals. They also grew a variety of crops, such as rice, wheat, barley, pulses, sugarcane, sesame, and mustard. They made earthen pots. Some of these were gray in color and others were red. One special type of pottery which was found from this site was the painted gray ware. As the name suggests, these were the gray pots which had painted designs. Usually, it consisted of simple lines and geometric patterns as well. After 2500 years ago, some Janpadas became even more important in comparison to others. These Janpadas came to be known as Mahajanpadas. Most of the Mahajanpadas had a capital city. Many of them were fortified. This means that huge walls of wood, brick, or stone were built around them. Forts were probably built because people were afraid of attacks of other kings and needed protection. It was also noticed that some rulers wanted to show how rich and powerful they are, so they had built really large and tall, impressive walls all around the city. Also, in this way, the land and the people living inside the fortified area could be controlled more easily by the king. Building such huge walls required a great deal of planning, because of which thousands, if not lakhs of bricks and stones had to be prepared. This meant that enormous labor was required, which included the men, women, and children as well. The Raja had to arrange resources for all these things. Let us have a look at few of the Mahajanpadas. Students, these were the 16 Mahajanapadas of 600 BC, which includes Kuru, Panchal, Kosal, Matsya, Vatsa, Avanti, etc. Now let us study about the taxes which were collected by the rulers of the Mahajanpadas. Why were these taxes collected? These taxes were collected so that the Rajas can arrange funds for building huge forts, maintaining armies, etc. They also needed officials to collect these taxes. So instead of depending upon occasional gifts which were brought by the people, the Rajas started collecting regular taxes from the people. Taxes on crops was the most important. This was because most people were farmers. Usually the tax was fixed at 1/6 of what was produced. This 1/6 was known as bhag or share from the crop. There were taxes on craft persons as well. This could have been in the form of labor. For example, a weaver or smith may have had to work for a day every month for the king in a form of tax. Herders were also expected to pay tax. Then taxes were also levied for the goods which were bought and sold through trade. Hunters and gatherers also had to pay tax in the form of forest produce to the Raja. There were certain changes as well in the field of agriculture. One of the change was the growing use of iron plowshare, which meant that heavy clayey soil could be turned over better than a wooden plowshare so that more grain could be produced. Second, people beginning transplanting paddy. What do you mean by transplanting paddy? First of all, paddy means rice. This meant that instead of throwing or scattering seeds on the ground, from which plants would sprout, saplings were grown before and then planted in the fields. This led to increase in production as more plants survived. However, this was a very hectic task. Generally, slave men and women, which were called dasas and dasis, and landless agricultural laborers, who were called the kammakaras, had to do this work. Let us now have a look at the two case studies about Magad and Baji. First, Magad. Magad was one of the most important Mahajanpada about 200 years ago. Many rivers such as Ganga and River Sun flowed through Magad. This was important for transport, water supplies, and making the land fertile. Many parts of Magad were forested. They had dense forest in which elephants lived. Forest wood was used for building houses, carts, chariots. The animals were used for training in the army. Besides, there were iron ore mines around the Magad area, which was used to make strong tools and weapons. Magad had two important rulers, Bimbisar and Ajatashatru, who were possible means to conquer other Janapadas. Mahapadmananda was another important ruler. He extended his control up to northwest part of the subcontinent. Rajagriha, which is called Rajgir today in Bihar, was the capital of Magad for several years. Later, the capital of Magad was shifted to Patliputra, which is called present-day Patna, is also in Bihar. More than 2300 years ago, a ruler named Alexander lived in Macedonia in Europe, wanted to become the world conqueror. Of course, he did not conquer the world, but he was able to conquer the parts of Egypt, West Asia, and came to the Indian subcontinent as well. While he was marching towards India, his soldiers refused to move forward. They were scared as they had already heard about the rulers of India having vast armies, chariots, and elephants. So the area, the power of Magad was so huge that the huge army of Alexander refused to enter India because it was protected by none other than the army of the Magad Empire. Now let us study about Vaji. While Magad was a very powerful kingdom, Vaji, with its capital in Vaishali, which is in Bihar, was under different form of government, which was known as the Gan or the Sangha. Gan is basically a group that has many members, and Sangh is an organization or an association. The Gan and the Sangha were not one, but they had many rulers, which means that Vaji was one big kingdom and it was divided into small parts, and every part had one leader. These rajas or leaders performed many rituals together. They officially met in assemblies and decided what had to be done through discussions and debate. For example, if there were attacked by an enemy, they had to meet to discuss what had to be done to deal with the threat. However, women, dasas, and kamakaras could not participate in these assemblies. Both the Buddha and Mahavira belonged to the Ganas and the Sanghas. Some of the most vivid or lived descriptions of the life in the Sanghas can be found in the Buddhist books. Rajas or powerful kingdoms tried to conquer the Sanghas, but nevertheless, these lasted for a very long time till about 1500 years ago, when the last Gan or Sangha were conquered by the Gupta rulers. So students, that was all about the explanation of history. Chapter number 5. Let us have a look at a few questions. You all are requested to solve these questions in your notebook with the help of the reading of the chapter and listening to the explanation. Thank you.